This week on Filthy Hope.
So often in the church we talk about, well, where are the young people? Or we talk about them. The young people want this, or the young people say that. Well, have you actually spent the time to understand them, to talk to them, to hear what are they passionate about, what do they care, what don't they like? And schools, and it doesn't need to be the Uniting Church schools, although that's there for many Uniting Church, but just engage better with young people and understand them, because there's no point putting on a program or putting on, let's do this fancy service with, smoke machines, or let's put on, whatever crappy youth ministry thing you want to do. If you haven't actually worked out, is this what young people want? Is this how they want to engage? Do they actually care about these things?
This podcast is a Uniting Heart and Soul production and was recorded on land that was stolen nearly 250 years ago. On this particular episode, we recorded on the land occupied by the Gadigal clan of the Eora Nation. We pay our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and we acknowledge that sovereignty over these lands was never ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. At Filthy Hope, we humbly contribute to the ancient and ongoing traditions of storytelling when we share stories on this podcast.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Filthy Hope. If it's your first time here, welcome. My name is Jonty, and on this podcast we talk about all the great spaces where Jesus, life and culture intersect. Joining me, as always, is my co-host Rev Ness.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm pumped about today.
As always, it's going to be a great convo.
Yes.
Because we are joined in the studio by Richard LeBroy. How are you, man?
Clap track.
Oh, you've done it to me again.
No,
Hang on.
focus. Just press the thing on.
We have a new soundboard. Here it is. Yeah.
Good job, Jonty. Excellent.
Hello. Very, very cool to be with you guys.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you. Thank you for joining us. Yeah. You know Richard. Well, we both know Richard quite well, but you know Richard going a long way back. Do you want to maybe explain that story?
Hilarious. Yeah. Well, the first time I ever met Richard was I was doing a reluctant period of time at Ravenswood High School with Reverend John Humphreys. And I didn't want to go because I wanted to be a prison chaplain, and I thought this is going to be a nightmare. There's no way what am I going to do in school chaplaincy? This is not a good fit for me. But they said, no, you'll go there, Vanessa. This will be good learning for you. So off I trot. And in comes this slick, immaculately, impeccably dressed young man with his iPad in hand, and John says to me, oh, Ness, today we've got Richard LeBroy coming to present on...
uni chaplaincy.
Uni chaplaincy, because he's a uni chaplain. I'm going, far out, there's people that are uni chaplains. Yeah. And he comes in and he does this in front of all the year 11 and 12 girls, this entire chapel service preaching, this young, gorgeous man with just an iPad that he's just, professionally scrolling like, a politician. Yeah. Down, like he could have been delivering right down the barrel of the camera. And here I am, good morning, I'm Richard LeBroy. He was just so slick and so phenomenal. I remember saying to John Humphreys, I want to be like that when I grow up.
I need to get you to do all my what do you call it? Like
intro
spots.
But you were like a professional back at 22 years of age, brother. You were just an impressive unit. And I remember thinking, this guy's going to go so far. You really were. And I would still love to be more like you, Richard.
And then you saw the light and came to school chaplaincy.
Yeah. Well, I didn't see the light. Jesus had a funny sense of humour.
Really often the way, isn't it?
Isn't it just? Yeah. And I was called into chaplaincy, and then Richard and I worked. He was one of my buddies because he was at Newington, the brother school to MLC, and we had quite a bit to do with each other over the 4 years that I was there. So it was a really good time.
And
really good time.
Your current role is at Newington, is that right?
Yeah. This is my 7th year as chaplain at Newington.
Chaplain at Newington.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
Loving it. Absolutely loving it.
Excellent. So, I mean, the first thing I'd love to know and get into is maybe you don't just land as chaplain at Newington.
No, you really don't.
As I would imagine. What was that journey? I mean, I'm sure there's all sorts of stops along the way. What was the initial call to ministry for you, and then how did that sort of lead to where you are now?
It's funny you say God's sense of humour, because I think that's often the way you don't see it at the time. It's only when you look back on it you can see God's hand and, as I said, God's sense of humour in it. I think I'd always been passionate about youth ministry. And since I left school, I got involved in local church youth ministry, and that kind of grew from there. Got into chaplaincy through university chaplaincy, and I also did a teaching degree along the way. And so I think I'd always thought that school chaplaincy was going to be a nice coalescence of everything. I went to a Uniting Church school, so I'd always really been passionate about school chaplaincy. But I didn't think this role at that time was going to be it. The timing wasn't right. I was still finishing my degree, my teaching degree. I was still doing other things. I thought, I'd love to do it, but not right now. And of course, God had different plans. And I found myself at Newington. And 7 years later, I'm still there and absolutely loving it.
It's amazing. Because you do it's a different arrangement at Newington as it was for me when I was in chaplaincy at MLC. Because I'm not a teacher, I didn't take on a school teaching load as in the academic subjects. I would teach the religious point to the younger school, but not the academic subjects that form their wider education. But you do that, Richard, as well as being a chaplain.
Yeah, because I'm a trained teacher. I'm a history teacher as well. And I love teaching history. And it gives me an opportunity to engage with the boys in a different way than you would in chapel.
Yeah.
So I teach, it varies each year, but generally, 2 or 3 classes between history and what we call philosophy and religious studies.
Wow.
And it gives me a chance to kind of get into, regular content, be part of the regular routines of teaching and everything, on top of doing all the chaplaincy work. We have 2 prep schools as well as a senior school, and so I do some RE in the prep schools, and and I get to see these boys as they move through the years. I've got boys in year 12 who I taught in year 6.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
Seeing kids that I taught in year 1 starting in year 7. It's a really special thing to be able to see that journey.
Yeah, it's a gift, isn't it?
And on the flip side as well, I've had, as a student, when you have those teachers who you recognise all the way through your schooling career, they're just such a, in the good cases of that, I've certainly had a couple of them, such that anchor point of familiarity when you're first day back at school in January or early Feb, whenever it is. I already feel a little bit better because
I can see this person.
Sir's here.
They know me and I know them. And,
exactly.
And I think that's so important in schools, and that's the amazing role that teachers can play as well as chaplains and other pastoral staff, is just kids knowing that there is somebody who cares about them and who knows them. I think, we talk about calling and we talk about calling in ministry, but teaching is a calling as well.
100%.
And I often, when I speak to staff, kind of not remind them, but kind of encourage them to see it that way, because you don't get into teaching for the money or for the conditions or anything. You get into it because you care. And I think on the flip side, the kids knowing that you care about them is so important.
Yeah, that's right. You build such beautiful bonds with them, don't you? It's a powerful thing, actually. It's beautiful being with the kids. Have you got some hilarious stories? Do you do the little ones?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. So I do kindergarten through to year 12.
Used to love those little ones.
And they're just cute and funny. And,
delight, aren't they?
And because I'm a pastor, Pastor LeBroy. And
is that what they call you?
Yeah, they call me Pastor LeBroy.
And do they get it right?
Eventually. Eventually. And so the kids navigating pastor, not pastor, is funny. I did end up, after, with some of the year 9 boys, they started calling me...
Bolognese?
No, linguine.
Linguine.
I got linguine.
Yeah.
Isn't that from Ratatouille?
Yeah, I think so. So that's kind of hard, But yeah, look, it's just it's so nice, and there's a difference teaching with the younger ones.
Yeah, I used to get called Miss Rev Ness.
Yes,
because I didn't want to be known as Rev Williams Henke.
Yeah.
As Rev Bent prior to me was Rev Bent. I think that's an easier words for little people to say. So I asked the principal, could I please be known as Rev Ness? Not Reverend Vanessa. That's too much of a mouthful.
Certainly not Williams Henke.
No,
way too big a mouthful.
what is that? That's just dumb. Could I just be Rev Ness? And she said, we've never had that before. I said, well, can we give that a crack? She said, yeah. So I was known as Rev Ness, but the kids call the teachers Miss.
Yes.
So it might be Miss Brown or Miss Scott or whatever their last name is. And the little ones would get it all muddled up, and they didn't know what a rev was. So what they hear is red. And I would get Miss Red Ness.
Yeah.
I just went with it. And some would try and shorten it because we're Aussies, oi, and I'd just get Red.
That's good. Yeah.
Hi, Red. Hi, Red.
That's not a bad nickname,
It's
actually.
cute.
Yeah.
They're just adorable, aren't they? And the things
is.
that they say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it's the socks.
Oh,
So the kids at the prep schools particularly know me for my socks.
they love your socks.
So I always wear really colourful socks, happy socks, and those kind of patterns and things. And so they've got to know over the years that Pastor LeBroy's got a good sock collection, and it's also an opportunity.
Love it.
It's an opportunity to kind of teach them a bit about fashion and men's styling.
Love
and,
it.
The important things to teach.
Totally critical. Yeah.
And so they now know, they want to know what the socks are.
Yeah.
And so it's now.
Can you show me your socks? Do they do that?
Yeah. So now it's first thing. What socks are you wearing today?
Yeah, I love that.
No, you need to sit down. You need to be focused.
I'll show you in a minute.
And then so it's a classroom management tool.
Oh,
and
wow.
so when they're quiet, then they can see the socks. And then it's they then start guessing. Well, he's wearing a blue tie today, so then that must be a blue socks because I've taught them.
Oh, I love
the
that.
tie has to match the socks, or sometimes it clashes intentionally.
Oh, you've got a very slick vibe, Richard LeBroy. So I'm imagining the boys would role model you 100%.
So even now, like when they come to the senior school, this again, year 7, what socks are you wearing?
Oh, I love that.
So it's always nice to kind of have those kind of quirks or things that
it's
the
beautiful.
connection point.
I had a creepy moment with a little K person sitting down, and I'm doing Godly Play, one of the Godly Play stories, and I'm new at it, and I'm learning all the bits, and I'm laying out all the bits of all the little characters on the board and making it all ready to go. And then all of it, and I'm sitting there with my legs together because I'm on the little stool and I've got to keep my legs together because you don't want to do the spread thing. And so I'm trying to shove my frock down between my legs so I can get comfy because you've got to be down with these little people, right? And the next thing I feel is this weird feeling going up my leg. There's a little girl.
I'm so scared.
This little girl patting my calf muscle with her hand going up my leg, and she's saying, Miss Red, you need to shave your legs. And I remember going, ick, this is not right. It's above my pay grade. Somebody tell her to stop touching me.
How old were they?
5.
Yeah, year 11. No.
Oh, I'll never forget it. And I'm going, oh, this is weird. So weird.
No, I have a handful of mates who are like pre-primary, early childhood educators, and some of the stories just kids. You need to learn the personal space thing, and you learn it by finding the boundary.
There are moments where I think, I am a senior high school teacher.
Yeah.
I admire primary teachers because I couldn't do it full time. I love going into the class, doing half an hour RE.
That's enough.
But it takes a whole other skill set and patience and everything, and I really admire them.
Yeah.
And I wasn't a trained school teacher, but I've been an educator of adults in terms of corporate health and wellness. And so I had an educating perspective on how to manage a group of people, but not little ones. So I actually applied all my drama training and my pantomime training. So I would be larger than life and hold them captive. But that takes huge energy outpour. And I would be buggered after
God,
two
yeah.
30-minute RE lessons. I'd be going, oh my God, I need a freaking lie down. So he killed me, man.
In COVID times when I was doing chaplaincy online, and you would have done as well,
Yes.
I felt like a play school presenter half
Totally.
the time.
Good morning, boys and girls.
Like, it's crazy, and like you have this Zoom screen of 100 little tiles or 200 tiles,
Full on, right?
full on, like prep school, years 3 to 6 chapel, and it's like I went off and like, shit, I felt like a play school presenter there.
Yeah, that was an exhausting time for us
Oh,
all,
yeah.
wasn't it? Yeah, special time though.
Yeah.
Learned a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I wonder, maybe continuing on this thread of thought for both of you, maybe what are the particular highlights that stand out to you in not just in teaching specifically in any of these, but just in education in general? Are there any particular highlights that you remember as being, oh yeah, that's why we do it?
Yeah, I do.
Either of you? Yeah.
For me, it's not particular moments. It's just seeing seeds of growth over the years. And I think now that I'm there, 6-7 years, I can start to see those seeds coming to fruition. And I think that's an incredible blessing if you're blessed to be in that space long enough. I often think about school chaplaincy as planting seeds and trusting that other people will grow it.
Yeah.
Or that certainly that God will grow it and other people will tend to it. And to be able to see moments of just connection or just, just that spark or something is quite incredible.
Yeah, it's really rewarding, isn't it?
It is,
It's a beautiful thing. I used to love watching the chapel services that we'd have once a year where the parents could come with the children for the house chapels.
Yeah.
They were really special because you'd actually get to see the kids with their mums and dads or their brothers and sisters, and they'd all come into chapel together. I used to love that because you'd make a connection with the parent and then the parent would make a connection with you. Yeah. And that, I suppose, that helped the seeds of growth and it helped form deeper bonds and relationships. And the parents would often say, they'd tell a story about they came home and the kid shared something that you said and I didn't even remember saying that.
No,
and the kid came home and it impacted them. Yeah. And the mum or the dad would say, it was really wonderful that you said that because at that time her grandma had just died. And I had no clue. Yeah. You have often no clue how some of our preparation lands on them because then they go home and mum says over dinner, how was your day, darling? And then the kid says their day and often we're obviously a part of their day, just like they're a part of our day. I'd go home and my daughters at the time, one was in uni and one was in high school and they couldn't wait to sit down to dinner. Mum, tell me about the day. What happened? And we had this one little favourite little one in pre-K that was just a little bit of a rat bag and she was just gold and I loved her and she always had a good story and my kids would just be like falling over in hysterics about the cuteness of the stuff that I had to deal with in the day and they'd say, can you believe you get paid to do this, Mum?
It is like that.
It's really beautiful.
And I think that is those connections that you build across a whole community.
Yeah.
And that's the really amazing thing about these kinds of schools. It's not come to class and leave. It's a community and sometimes a community for life.
Yep.
And that's, getting to do baptisms of children, of old boys who left 10, 20 years ago, generations of families that have come to this place for baptism.
It's epic.
Even doing funerals for old boys who 50, 60 years after they've left still have this connection to this school. And their classmates and their family gather again at the end of life.
Yep.
It's an incredible blessing to be a part of that.
Yeah, my dad's a Newington boy and Dad goes to all the old boys functions and Dad went on to become a Wallaby and he has all his mates, that some of them are still alive. A couple of his really best mates, and they all talk Newington talk. It's a big deal. And when Dad got married for a second time, he chose to get married in the Newington Chapel.
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah,
That's
it was
awesome.
just amazing. Yeah. And it was an incredible thing that he chose to do it there because it meant there was a church that he had felt roots at.
In, correct.
Yeah, deep.
Yeah, it's deep. And, again, that idea of seeds and growth, I often come back to the prayer of Oscar Romero, prophets of a future not our own. You know, we plant seeds that we won't see grow, and I can't quote it because it's not coming to me right now.
Yeah.
But that idea in that prayer that sometimes we plant the seeds and we'll see someone else grow it. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes I get to tend to the seeds that someone else planted 3 decades ago.
Right.
You know, and that's an amazing blessing to be part of these schools.
Yeah, it is a special place. And I think those that I used to call it the festival of year 12.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's like their final term. It's like a festival. It's like, I felt like every week there was some year 12 celebration in that final term as they're getting ready to launch for pre-HSC prep and that study break. That is such an emotional time, saying goodbye to these precious girls that you've loved through what could have been really tumultuous life experiences and just growing up. You know, 16, 17-year-old young women, young men in your case, Richard, and pastorally caring for them through what are tricky times for them at that stage. And I had the privilege of walking with some kids that are, you know, that were really mentally unwell at the time and got to see them flourish in the end. Yeah. That's awesome.
It's an incredible blessing and privilege to be part of that, to do ministry, to talk about God, to talk about that, God's love, and, you know, just that, God's love for you in that space. It's really, really cool.
Can I tell you a funny story?
Go ahead.
And I'm sure you don't have a funny story like this. That's why I'll share it, because it'll be quite unique. So I'm a new reverend at MLC, and I knew I have a tendency in the olden days to have a bit of a gutter mouth. I don't anymore. Do I, Jonty? I'm doing really well.
No, you're doing really well.
Really improved.
Yeah. I'm the one now that swears on the show.
Yeah, I'm doing so well because I'm brave and sensible now. That's what God told me to be this year. And I'm trying to just watch the filth that would previously come out of my mouth. Anyway, so I'm at MLC school and I'm a new chaplain and I'm really excited. And because I knew that I had the propensity to maybe say shit or bum, I thought what I'd do is I'd write out every single word in my sermon. That's why I was so impressed by you and your iPad and you just looking at the girl's eyes and doing your thing and not saying anything rude. I didn't know quite how you did that. And so I would write down every single word that I would say, and I would not go off piste one bit because I couldn't trust myself that I wouldn't say something rude in my excitement and nervousness. So I'm delivering this sermon and I'm doing the thing, 900 girls doing the thing, and I thought that I'd smashed it out of the ballpark just quietly, pretty happy with it, 8 minutes in, out, beautiful, couple of songs sandwich, how it went, prayers, the thing was beautiful. Then at the end, the principal says to me, Reverend Vanessa, could you please meet me in my office? I said, yes, Louise, I'll meet you in the office. I thought, I feel like I'm busted.
Yeah, you're in year 9 again. And I'll see you in the office.
I was back in year 9, exactly.
And the principal's office.
Was busted for kissing John Udovisic in the car.
I hope that's a real person.
That is a real person. Anyway, there I was. I went down to Louise's office and I really loved her. She was a precious woman. She said to me, Rev Ness, and I've got Frances there. She was the deputy. And Louise says, Rev Ness, are you aware that you said an expletive in the sermon today? And I was super cocky because I knew I hadn't, because I had every word written down. Yeah. And I put my hands on my hips like I was a bit, watch this bitch, you watch, I'm going to nail you. And I say, I'm sorry, Louise, but I did not, because every single word that I said in that sermon is on my bit of paper. She says, and she looks at Frances and they smirk, and she looks at me back and she says, well, I suggest you pop upstairs and get that sermon for me then. I said, I will. And so I go upstairs, get the sermon, and I think I'm going to prove to her that I know what I said. I said, here's my sermon. I pass it across to Louise, and she says, are you aware of the definition of the word friggin'? And I said, well, I thought it was better than saying fuck. So I said, friggin'. And she said to me, Rev Ness, it is a swear word. Isn't it, Francis? And Francis nods. And they then tell me what it means. And I go purple and I'm so offended and I feel so bad. And then I cry and I beg their forgiveness. And I'm having a holy moment of repentance right in the office. I say, I swear I'll never say that again. I'm so sorry. But I really thought I was doing the right thing. And I think they had pissed themselves laughing when I left. Have you had a moment like that? Have you got busted?
Thankfully, I don't think I have. I don't know. Maybe I have.
You haven't been pulled into the principal's office?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, you're very lucky.
I'm sure there's been things people have been pissed off with what I've said.
Yeah, of course.
But
yeah.
So
never called into the principal's office.
Not for a bad word. No. Yeah, lucky you.
I for a while when I was in uni, was doing some tutoring, and I did HSC English as well as some history and some music. And I remember I got pulled up by a parent of one of the year 12s that I was... No, he was in year 9 or 10 maybe. It wasn't in senior school. Jonty, we're a bit worried about our son. Let's call him Xavier. That's his name. We're worried that he's reading too much.
Oh.
And we're wondering if this is under your influence as his English tutor, because we're a bit worried because he's not doing his schoolwork and he's reading all these books.
Shocking.
What books is he reading? Oh, I don't know. I'd have to check. They were the textbooks for like the source text that he had to write about. I was like, yeah. I was encouraging him to read.
His head's in a book.
Yeah. You mean he was reading the text for school? Yeah. That was me. Yeah, I'll cop responsibility.
You
for
mean
that.
he was doing his work?
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
what you were paying me $60 an hour for.
Yeah. Literally. I mean, it was like, well, long story short, I was not tutoring that kid for much longer because they got a quote unquote real tutor who isn't going to get him to read,
The
text.
Hands above.
It was good money though. Anyone at uni wanting to earn a bit of cash while they're studying tutoring.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I'd love to know maybe both of you have spent time professionally in a little interesting grey area between education and pedagogy and where that overlaps with the church. And I'd be curious to know, maybe first from you, Richard, how you manage that overlap, and is it something that you're wary of? Maybe it isn't, I don't know, and how to kind of make sure that neither is crossing too far, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. You talk in the church, and the church has often particular ideas about the schools, and you talk sometimes in the schools, and the schools have a particular idea about the church, and most of the time those perspectives are wrong, and there's kind of assumptions that are just based off lack of understanding or lack of relationship. But I think I straddle both camps, being a trained teacher and also doing ministry stuff, so I can kind of navigate the tensions sometimes, if there ever are. Doing chaplaincy and ministry in schools looks vastly different to ministry in any other context.
Yeah.
Because to start off with, pretty much, all of your congregation are not choosing to be there. They have to be there because it's timetabled in.
Yeah.
So that's a different... And most of your congregation don't have a church background.
Yeah.
So your touchstones, your general understandings of faith change, as simple as, Jesus came out of the tomb at Easter and was born in a stable at Christmas. That's not there.
Yeah.
Which you walk into a church and everyone knows what Easter and Christmas is, or, most 90% do. So so the paradigm of how you do ministry looks very, very different. I love that challenge. I love having to recontextualize and change things. But you do have, it is a grey area. And it's a often misunderstood or poorly understood area by both, if you want to talk sides of the school and the church. But I think over time you see relationships and understanding and just getting to know it being a way to break it down.
That certainly resonates with me as a student that went to a private school in Sydney that had timetabled chapel services
Yeah.
and similar things. I wasn't there at the time in year 9 and 10 when there was what I think at the time was called Wisdom, Life and Faith, maybe. Maybe giving away what school I was at there. But certainly like the lasting impression, and then as a year 12 I was the chapel prefect, so I was then kind of given the opportunity to talk to a lot of the boys in my year about what chapel and the whole where school kind of crossed over with church, what that kind of meant to them. And like 99.9% couldn't remember a single thing that was read to them out of the Bible. No. It was the relationship that they had with the Revs.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the positive impact that they had on them growing up, because they saw them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week from the age of 12 all the way through to being an adult. And a lot of people, like I can hear people maybe thinking, oh, but if they don't remember anything they learned about Scripture, then did you really do your job? Yeah, of course they did, if they're reflecting the love and light of Christ.
Yeah. Modelling that.
Exactly.
And I think it is often just showing up and, modelling Christ. And, and this is who Jesus says he is, and I'm going to try to live that out as best as I can and model that to you.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if they can't quote Scripture or even, know what, tomb equals Easter.
Yeah. I remember getting into a lot of trouble because I talked miracles. I'm a bit of a Holy Spirit miracle chick. And talking miracles, and I think we were talking Lazarus at the time and him being raised. Yeah. And then I found a video in a faraway village somewhere in Africa of a little child that was raised from the dead. And I talked and referred to that as miracles can happen today, that miracles can happen. And I talked about the theology of, miracles. It's not just something that happened back when Jesus walked the earth. This is something that can actually happen today, and there's miracles that happen all the time. And I shared some miracle stories in my own family life, and I got busted for that because I shouldn't be talking about that stuff. And how dare I talk about that stuff?
Because it was too far off the beaten track of...
Too far off the curriculum, probably. Okay. And too scary for teachers that are not Christians,
right? But
they're having to teach in this school, and I was just teaching from what I knew and from what I had learnt in my theological training. So it was a tricky time actually to navigate that. I had to be very careful.
It can be, and I guess like these institutions are, there's a lot of tradition, a lot of history, a lot of weight and gravitas behind that, and so I think often you do need to. You do have to work within those structures.
Yeah,
you do have to kind
so.
of fit into that box. And I think people sometimes try to come and, push the walls down and kind of blow up the place, and it doesn't work.
No.
Because...
But that doesn't happen that doesn't work in a church either, does it? When a minister comes in and does that.
And again, I think that's where there's this perceived difference, but actually it's very much the same. They're, both sandstone structures that have lasted for centuries in some cases.
They're often reticent to change.
Yeah.
They're not a fan.
Well, I don't know if they are. Like, I think they're proud of tradition, and I think that's a great thing. I'm a historian. I love tradition, I love history, and I think being grounded in that is important. But being able to contextualise it and see, well, what does it mean for us today is important.
Yeah.
I remember trying to update the Lord's Prayer to the modern, what we call the modern version of the Lord's Prayer, and the pushback from the old girls' union was just off the charts. They did not want the Lord's Prayer to be changed.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. That's okay. Let's not change it then. How about you just say it in your own language the way you want to say it?
And I think that's the thing, is finding where can you push and where can you change and where do you need to hold the traditions and hold it, even if it may not be what you agree with.
Oh, totally.
But there's value in that for this community. And that's the same in any church, right?
It was so interesting.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot as a school chaplain.
I think it's really important in like identifying, even if like in any setting, in any institution, like if a particular tradition or idea isn't for you, like that's fine.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that it's your job to like slice it down and cut for everyone else, because clearly it's there for a reason and it serves people that it's important for.
Very much so.
Yeah, because you mentioned like with ministers that in church settings, it's similar. You can't just come in and
slice
with
and
the
dice.
sickle and just go hell for leather, because you're going to take people out on the way through.
Yeah, or people don't stay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or get burnt. Or
That's
hurt.
it. Hurt.
And again, that's why I come back to relationship. You've got to build the relationship first.
Yeah.
You've got to build the trust, particularly in a school, but I think certainly in congregations, and people need to know who you are and be able to trust who you are to then be able to go on the journey with you. And then you can start melding the edges, or you can start, changing the walls or things, the old, you don't move the pulpit, from one side to the other, you move it 1 inch at a time.
Yeah.
That's right. Richard, what do you reckon? So we have this opportunity in the schools to do this beautiful ministry work and impact kids throughout their education and through these Uniting Church schools. What is it that we can learn in the congregational setting that we would then attract the children into our congregations? What is it that we're missing? There's got to be a piece
That's an interesting
that we're
one.
missing.
I think having a better understanding of young people. Like so often in the church we talk about, well, where are the young people? Or we talk about them. The young people want this, or the young people say that. Well, have you actually spent the time to understand them, to talk to them, to hear what are they passionate about? What do they care? What don't they like? And schools, and it doesn't need to be the Uniting Church schools, although that's there for many Uniting Church, but just engage better with young people and understand them, because there's no point putting on a program or putting on, let's do this fancy service with, smoke machines, or let's put on, whatever crappy youth ministry thing you want to do. If you haven't actually worked out, is this what young people want? Is this how they want to engage? Do they actually care about these things?
Yeah. It's a changing paradigm too with social media, I'd imagine.
Yeah, correct.
Getting kids out from behind their devices to come and be a part of a community.
I think it's a lot of it is also giving kids a reason to come out from behind their devices.
Yeah.
If they look up from their devices and they see 4 hymns on a Sunday morning,
why
thank you.
No,
Yeah,
thank
of course.
you.
Why would you?
Yeah.
I love the 4 hymns, but I also get that most people don't.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. And so many of our churches are just boring and not engaging, not even for young people, but for
anyone
under the age of, I don't know, it's a high age part.
I was going to see how high you're going to go with that, yeah.
And so, but I think one of the things that we in our churches can genuinely offer, again, I come back to it, is relationship and modelling to people, doesn't even young people, a God and a Christ who loves and cares for you no matter what, particularly in the world where you're hearing so much crap about so much. Being able to just simply say, God loves you, Jesus loves you, I love you, I care about you, is actually kind of countercultural.
Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah, I think, I don't want to spend too much on it, but like the whole social media thing, I think is really a challenge, but one that we can't avoid.
No, correct.
In this, not in the sense of that social media itself is a challenge, but in terms of cross-generationally, us understanding the place that the internet now holds in everyone under the age of probably 30, maybe even 40. Like we're now, like the people who are now graduating high school have always had the internet.
Yeah.
I'm 25, 26, far out, I just realised I'm 26 this year. I've always had the internet.
Right.
Yeah.
And, like, it's not weird for me, and it's that thing where like you talk to anyone who suddenly who references Twitter in a sense, in a setting that it doesn't make sense. They clearly don't understand. Therefore, I'm going to have to work hard to form a relationship with this person, which is going against what we were just talking about.
Correct.
About relationship is the key.
Correct.
And if there's this barrier, and I say this like people who don't understand have to understand. That's not it. It's all of us have this giant piece of technology just dropped in our laps about 30 years ago, and we still haven't figured it out.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's funny. I often tell this story. In my history teaching in year 9, I teach about the Renaissance, the move from kind of Renaissance and Enlightenment thinking into Industrial Revolution, that kind of world. And as a stimulus, I would often use the announcement of Steve Jobs of the first iPhone, where he announces, okay, we're going to have this phone and we're going to have an email and we're going to have a music player, which they had all those things, Blackberries and iPods and things, and we're going to put it in one. And Steve, Jobs does this thing, and the people lose their mind when he says this is the one in the one device. And I use that to kind of say this is what the Enlightenment was. The problem is, for these Year 9 boys, they don't actually get how monumental a shift it was.
Yeah.
No.
Because they've only known the world
They
of
never
the
had a
iPhone.
Walkman.
They never had a Walkman. They
right,
never had a Nokia phone with Snake.
No.
Or a Coke phone, which was my first phone.
Yes.
And so kind of using that analogy of the world shifts from one way of being to another way of being, they don't get it.
No.
Because they've only been in that. And as you say, this is now 30 years on and the church still hasn't kind of worked it out.
I think broader than the church, even just like human beings haven't quite caught up to the pace at which technology now allows us to move at. So it's a challenge for society at large. But it's also, I think, an opportunity for the church. It's this big, broad, open meadow of opportunity, cost-effective, almost free. Everyone has one of these supercomputers in your pocket. You can reach anyone whenever you want.
Yeah.
That is a hugely useful and quite honestly mind-blowing tool that we all have at our disposal. So understanding how we can use that in a way that develops and nurtures relationship instead of fracturing it that's the challenge, because it has such potential to be such a positive tool, but also, as we all know, it has such potential to completely fracture and isolate. Yeah.
And I think that's the thing, and that's where, again, churches can be, it offers something different. It offers the face-to-face, the relationship, because if churches are doing their best, we try to model God's love for you.
Through community. Yeah.
And having that physical community and that kind of thing. I think we need to move past it, assuming that that's in a stone building at 9:30 on a Sunday morning.
Right.
But being able to model real community is important.
Yeah. And we get that at school.
Yeah.
Yeah, every day.
Every day.
Yeah.
I still remember them. Like, there's almost a particular moment that I remember in like that month or two after I finished school, where I was like, I actually have to like intentionally meet people now.
Yeah.
I don't just see everyone every day.
No, that's right. Yeah, the catching up with all the friends. You've got to actually do it. I remember that feeling myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
most interesting.
We all talk about our school memories.
Yeah.
School is a foundational, fundamental part of our existence.
It's one of our first communities, isn't it? Yeah, other than maybe our neighbours and maybe sporting groups, it's a big community that you've got to coexist in, and you learn all the fundamentals of survival, really. It's a survival.
And I think having chaplaincy as part of that, having a presence of God and church as part of navigating that is so important.
It cops a bit of a heavy rap, though, private schools, doesn't it? I know in the Uniting Church we're a bit divided like that. There's a whole faction of people that think it's a waste of money, and why should the church be a part of this educational thing? It's not the church. And I think, you need to come and spend a day with one of the chaplains.
That's the thing, right? And I think, again, the church
mission
often
field.
have this perception of private schools. And yes, for the majority of schools that the Uniting Church is involved in are some of the elite, wealthiest. And we have to acknowledge that. And we have to acknowledge what comes with that.
Yeah. Money, mate, money.
But we can't just ignore it. We can't just kind of dismiss it. And as you say, come and spend a day with us.
It's a mission field. I was ordained into the diaconate, and I thought going into the school was just a perfect application of diaconate ministry.
Yeah.
I could just be a part of this captive mission field. I didn't even have to go and find them, mate. I just turned up at 7:30 and there they were. Yeah. And I could just do my Jesus thing unashamedly in the playground with this captive audience. It was just like gold. People need to understand it is an opportunity to scatter the seeds.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. And it's not about converting bums to pews. You know? It's not about all of these people are now going to be members of the Uniting Church and suddenly we're going to have 10,000 young people. That's not it.
No.
It's being able to scatter the seeds and say, this is who God is, this is who Jesus is.
Yeah. Imagine these people at school, a part of their education, are getting a positive experience of understanding the love and light of Christ in the school.
Correct.
That can't be a bad thing.
Correct.
I think it's a winner chicken dinner.
Yeah. And I'll always get on my, soapbox and advocate for the place of schools.
Yeah, me too.
And I think we're getting better in the Uniting Church of understanding that. We're certainly not there as yet. There's certainly a lot of prejudice and assumptions there. But we're getting better as we kind of understand what it looks like, what schools is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've had conversations, and having also spent 3 years in youth ministry as well, a bit of church language here, like Uniting Church people will be well aware of the gaping hole in our demographic between really from 0 to sort of 35, 40. And then you look at all of these Uniting Church schools and you kind of go, there's a whole bunch of people. And it often, I wasn't in youth ministry long enough to kind of really settle, I found, but certainly people would bring that up at like a church council meeting or a youth leadership meeting or something. It should be easy. Why don't we just go in there and bring them all in here? And it's always just like, you realise all of them have to be there.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And I don't know, I guess I really struggled once I kind of actually started to think about the dynamic of the gaping hole in that first third of life versus the resources and the people that congregate around, quote, the Uniting Church in the school settings. I don't know.
And I don't think it's as simple as one fills that hole.
Exactly.
But there's a way that we can learn from and understand ministry with young people and understand young people better in the church by understanding schools and schools ministry better.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have had an opportunity to work collaboratively with your school when I was at MLC and do a church plant at our school. And so that we have the boys and the girls mixing together in a church plant, and it's just church for young people. It's no old people are allowed. It's just this is just for young people with
There's a bouncer with
really
to show your
carding
license at the
them.
beginning.
Over 20, you're out, mate. You can't come in. With really vibey music, all the things that kids want to be a part of. Good media, good, honest, robust conversation, debate. Talking about the real issues, the real things that are on their heart and how that relates to kingdom culture. I think there's a real need for an opportunity. I don't even know if we've actually ever done a church plant, a collaboration, because you think of Knox and Ravo, they could do a collab. I know they collab on cadets.
It certainly got brought up a handful of times when I was in youth ministry.
I think it'd be an amazing thing. And I think maybe Synod, shout out to Synod, we need people that are actually not necessarily the school chaplains in the school because they've already got a job, but setting aside other ministry agents to actually be the church planters within the schools, and then they work alongside the school chaplains as a conduit to maybe encourage the kids to come into these events. We feed them, we give them pizza, we give them good food and good Coke and wind them up and then send them home, give them a big Jesus moment in the hall. I think.
And that's the thing. And it comes to being more broad in our understanding of what is church.
Yeah.
How do our structures and how do our all those things that sit behind church allow the most flourishing communities.
Right, because the problem is, Richard, because the way we present chapel in our chapel services in the church is very, like you said, steeped in tradition, and it's very conservative how we do it. It really is. Am I right there? Yeah. So then to kind of flip that thing and to do a church plant that's just radically out there, cool and vibey, and actually what the kids really want. Maybe they won't want to come to chapel in their
set seats with their blazers on and their ties.
They'll want to get up and get cool.
But it's finding that balance, right? Because there's a reason why we have those things and the expectations on the students, right? But how do we create that space where they want to get up or whatever vibe?
Yeah.
While still having.
I think we need to give it a crack, Richard. I think that we're onto something here. I really think we should reach out to the peeps, and I think we should give it a crack. Yeah, I know. I'd love to be a part of something like that.
I think
it's a mission field.
I certainly. There are kids in high school that go to youth group.
Oh yeah,
like they exist in larger numbers than I think a lot of the time we assume. And just talking to them and be like, hey, what would you want?
Yeah.
Right.
If you were to have a community outside of school that wasn't on a Friday night youth group, what would you want?
Out of your uniform.
Yeah. Whatever. And just, I think that's where you start.
That's where I think that's where you start with any ministry with young
Exactly.
people.
Yeah.
You don't assume this is going to work for them.
Yep.
You speak with them. You build the relationship. You
100%.
listen to them, and then you act on what they want.
Yeah.
You don't then think, what they really meant was this, because I think that's going to work better.
And I've got this number of years of experience doing it this way. So what they actually reckon, There's something that I have, and I've been dying to go, A, to these events, and also B, I've got one of their numbers, so I'm going to hit them up to come on the show, is, and it's not specifically high school, it's young adults, but there are lots of high schoolers that attend this. I think it's relevant, is this collective called One Body Worship. And it's now almost 10 events in, I think. And it started as 5 or 6 mates playing music just in their home because they wanted to on a Wednesday or a Thursday night. And, I can't remember exactly how many people were there, but, they told their mates they were doing it, and a handful of people showed up. I think the end of year, or the last one of the last ones I did towards the end of 2023 was at Christchurch in St Ives, and they filled the room.
Yeah.
Wow.
And there's no, I'm not saying there's no governance, but it's just purely some young people got together and said, we want to do this because this feels like where we belong, and this feels like something that we own, and people have just flocked to it. And so that's a perfect example of no one sat down in a meeting and said, you know what young people might want?
Yeah. And here's the strategy and here's the plan. And
And I will say, once it kicks off, you do need that stuff for it to be sustainable.
Yeah.
But for it to be a really authentic expression of belonging and worship, it just came out of the people in that community organically.
Yeah.
So I think, I don't know how you identify those things and then give it enough water to grow without kind of encroaching on it. But that's probably a conversation for another time. But it's a big question. I don't know.
Oh, we've definitely solved the problem of the world here today. It's been epic. Hey, Richard, what are you grateful for?
Grateful for so many things. I'm grateful for my family, for my parents. I'm grateful for the hand of God in my life.
Yeah.
That I haven't always seen at the time.
Yep.
But, when you look back and you see God's kind of guiding this way, I'm grateful to be part of this church and be engaged and doing, working hard for the future of this church.
You've been a part of the Uniting Church since you were a child, I believe, haven't you?
I was born into it. I always joke, Mum booked my baptism before I was born.
She didn't. Did she really?
Yeah.
Is that a true thing?
Yeah. There was a particular date that she wanted for family reasons, and so she was pregnant and said to the minister, look, I know this is odd, but I want to have my child baptised on this day. I wasn't born as yet, but it was locked in.
Oh,
So I
love
was
it.
I was always in.
Oh, do you know who baptised you?
Yeah, Graham Ellis.
Oh, wow.
And Graham's been an incredible, one of those mentors through the journey
How amazing. Which church?
at North Ryde Uniting Church.
You've been there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
In mum's tummy.
Yeah, pretty much.
That is magnificent. Isn't that unreal? Oh, I love that story.
I was always part of the Uniting Church.
Yeah,
I was-
conceived, buddy.
I was locked in.
Yeah.
before-
Life member. Yeah. I guess final question then, because this is something that I'm really passionate about as well. Also, as someone who's a life member, born into the church that I'm currently attending, this movement that we live and breathe is Uniting Church. What are the important things for you as we look ahead to the future that you think are just vital?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about this because I'm on national committees. I'm on the National Assembly Standing Committee and on Act 2 Steering Committee, kind of looking at this massive project of the future of the church, and it's kind of that question of what holds us, and I think the inclusivity that we proclaim, and we really hold that deep to who we are. We don't always live it out, but we hold it deep to who we are, that God's love is inclusive of all people, and there's a place and a leadership place for all people. I think is really unique. I think it's a faith. We try for a faith in action. Living out our faith is important. The basis of union talks about a fellowship of reconciliation and renewal, which is the end in view of the whole creation, and trying to be that fellowship of reconciliation, renewal in the world is a powerful challenge. It's amazing that those words were written, in the early 70s and still ring true today, and still we've got a long way to go.
Yeah.
But I think that kind of calling in the church is a powerful thing.
Maybe for people that might be interested in hearing or reading more about Act 2, do you want to maybe just very briefly what is it and where can people
So
read more?
if you just search Act 2, it's a project exploring the future shape of the Uniting Church, and we've spent almost 2 years kind of consulting and looking and hearing, and we've got a picture of the Uniting Church that's more filled out than it ever has been, and now we're sort of thinking about what are ways forward and what are directions forward for the future of the church. It is so exciting. It's a little bit scary, but so exciting at being able to say, what does the church look like for the next 50 years, the next act of our life.
Thanks for being a part of that and doing that work for the wider church. I think that assembly work is absolutely crucial to, like you said, this next part 2, Act 2.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
I enjoy it.
Yeah.
I enjoy it, and it's a great way to give back to the church and serve the wider church in a different way.
Yeah, it's wonderful, Richard.
Yeah, down below there'll be a link to some stuff if people want to read more about that. Yeah, we'll make sure that's down there.
Yeah, awesome.
I think that just about wraps us. Is there anything else you want to plug while we're here before we switch everything off?
I think you've heard a lot about schools ministry today, and I think I want to people to hear how awesome that role is. It's a hard job.
Yeah.
It's a busy job. But it is such a rewarding job to be doing ministry in these schools, and the place of those schools in our broader church is a really, really special thing.
Yeah. Well, the school's very lucky to have you there, Newington, smashing it out of the ballpark, having you there, brother. And you're an awesome inspiration. Those young men would look up to you as a beautiful role model. So go you, I say.
Absolutely. And if anyone watching, listening, however you're getting this podcast, if you have thoughts, questions, follow-ups, we're on social media. Most of our platforms are at filthyhope_pod. Or you can email us at filthyhopepod@gmail.com. If anyone wants to follow anything up, we would love to hear your thoughts. That just about does us today, I think. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Yeah, had a blast. We'll see you next week. This has been another episode of Filthy Hope.
This is a